everyone. Welcome to this special tech talk show brought to you in celebration of Engineers Day. As we celebrate Engineers Day, it is only fitting that we feature someone who truly embodies the true spirit of engineering, and that person is none other than our very own Matthew Pullen, Senior VP Technology. Matthew, as all of us know, is driven by an unwavering passion for technology. Matthew brings hands-on and deep expertise in technology and vast experience behind him. He is the go-to person for all things tech, renowned for solving complex engineering challenges, and admired for the energy, the curiosity, and the zeal he brings to everything he does. A warm welcome to him on behalf of all of us.
Thank you.
On this occasion, we have identified some core themes for discussion, AI being the heart of it. These topics not only reflect the current pulse of technology, but also spark conversations that are critical to the future of engineering. I, Veena, will be guiding this conversation and asking Matthew questions on behalf of all of you. So Matthew, can we start?
Yes, let's get going.
Engineers have always been problem solvers. In today's fast changing world, what do you think defines the relevance of an engineer?
Okay. Engineers have been problem solvers and will continue to remain problem solvers. There's no change in that. What's changing is the velocity at we are solving problems. So if you go back 2 decades ago, a certain type of problem statement that would have required like a 50-member team to solve it, with a lot of the open source innovations that have come in the last 2 decades have been like a single team problem statements to solve, right? And now with AI coming on board, that's going to get even more commoditized. So that's not to say that engineers the role of an engineer will diminish, but it's to say that a good engineer will now have to start leveraging all these tools to see how they can work more efficiently, work more faster, and design better systems, right? So if you look at what is an engineering mindset, it's basically combining a lot of things. It's not just about solving the problem. I mean, a lot of us can get the problem solved. It's also applying, math. It's also applying design concepts. It's also looking at, what interests users. So it's a combination of a lot of things. And AI can actually help you move faster with in each of the dimensions. So the way I see it, we as engineers should embrace these tools and get to be more efficient with these tools. They're not going to replace us, but they're going to help us become 10x engineers. That's how I see the future direction going.
Right. So coming to my next question, which is also related to what you had already mentioned, though. So what makes the engineers truly stand out in this era where AI is coming in to automate most of the work?
Okay. So the answer is it's not just because of AI, but what makes an engineer truly stand out is a combination of things I spoke about earlier. Okay, so I'll try to scope my conversation to software engineering because that's what is relevant for all of us, right? Engineering is a very wide field.
Sure.
So if you look at software engineering, the best engineers have been people who are able to design efficient systems, build efficient systems, deliver it to end users, are able to build secure systems, are able to ensure that these secure systems, scalable systems operate at a, like a manageable cost. So engineers have been looking at a lot of these aspects, right? And even in the world of AI, all of these are still relevant. Okay, now if you are using AI tools, you can write code faster, you can get design ideas, you can get, you can get some sort of feedback on your design, on your data models, you can get all that. But you as a human being is responsible for stitching all of that together, okay? So there is a concept called mechanical empathy, which is important to understand. What is mechanical empathy? Mechanical empathy is when you build something, you knowing the environment in which it runs so well that you're actually fine-tuning it for that environment. Okay, and I'll give you an example. So if you're creating, let's say, an API or building a front-end screen, right? The way mechanical empathy applies to software engineering is that if you know what are the constraints of the browser, or if you know what are the constraints of the runtime where this is going to be executing, and you know it so well that you're actually fine-tuning your solution to how best it can work on those environments, that is what defines a good engineer, right? And I would say even with AI, there's a lot of scope to. So if you those of you who have embraced AI, you will realize that unless you prompt, the responses from AI tools are also not considering all these dimensions. They're sometimes very they're just like trying to solve a problem, but then you need to prompt them to kind of say, what if these constraints are there? What if my users need these, right? So it's a combination of a lot of these things, and whether it with AI or without AI, the definition of what does a good engineer need to do, I think it's pretty constant, right? Now, where I feel now, how do you develop mechanical empathy? That's where the trick is. Increasingly, we are in an era where we get answers. I mean, in the last 20 years, Google has been giving us ready answers to a lot of our things, right? And we thought that was acceptable velocity speed of getting answers. But then now we realize that with these LLMs, it's a lot more efficient, but you're getting a single point of view compared to let's say a Google search where you could get like maybe 10 articles, you get different perspectives, and then you form an opinion, right? Whereas now you're actually getting an opinion, right? So to kind of develop mechanical empathy, we need to have the ability to still use AI to search more, and that is important. So that is something that I see lacking in this era as well, right? Where because it's so easy to get a direct answer to a problem statement that we sometimes don't search on what are the other options. Is there a different way to think about this? And that journey is what will kind of build in that mechanical empathy in ourselves to build better and better systems.
So yes, coming from that question, I think my next question would be, how is AI changing the way that the young developers are thinking? So is it helping them learn, or is it just making them over-reliant?
Yeah, we are getting into, in my assessment, we are getting into a slightly dangerous territory here. If not used in the right shape and form, I don't know how we are going to land in there. Even when we had the Stack Overflows of the world, there was a problem where there is an error, you search, based on that error, you get something, you try it, and what you're getting when you search on Google was not tailored for your problem statement. You still had to kind of convert from that generic solution approach to do some hit and trial and make it work. But compare that to now, you just show the problem statement, and AI recommends the solution, and the loop sometimes will get you there. But the risk in this is a lot of people are actually using this to get to solutions but not really understanding what the solution is, and that is the dangerous territory I'm talking about. I have faced that scenario myself where I've used Claude Code or Copilot to generate some code, compared to me in the earlier era where I would have been writing that code. A month later, if I see that I can kind of relate to it. But now, because a lot of it is generated, and when you're generating it, obviously the expectation is that you kind of proofread and ensure correctness. But there's a tendency to sometimes overlook that. And it's very people specific, right? I mean, it's people dependent. Some people still proofread it and make changes, prompt to make it better and all of that, but not everybody does it. And that's why I said, while it helps, it definitely helps. All projects would benefit by having that increase in velocity of getting solutions out. But I really feel that if the people who are actually bringing in those solutions using these tools really don't get into those foundational aspects, I mean, over time we would become very over reliant it is like use it like your I wouldn't say slave. Use it like your assistant. Don't be a slave to it. That's how I would put it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think relating to that, so would we then agree to saying that AI is creating something new, or would we say that it's just rewriting and remixing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the industry itself is split on a viewpoint on that. Of course, if you look at how LLMs work, right? I mean, they are trained on massive amounts of text, right? So it is basically trying to predict what is a good next token. I mean, that is the foundational aspect of an LLM. So you would naturally want to assume that because it is being trained on some data, there is a tendency to assume that because it is trained on a certain data, what it can output is just what it has seen on the data. Okay, but that's not true, because even well before LLMs came in, when you had the typical traditional neural networks based deep learning, you would always, if you had, let's say, a training set of like 1 million samples, you would only use about 80% of the data to train your model, and the rest of the data would be used to test the trained model. So which means you don't want to train it on all the data and sort of overfit that data into that model so that it just becomes a very intelligent parrot. That has never been the intention with any AI practice, even before LLMs. So even with LLMs, the same principle continues. So while we can always assume that because it is trained on a certain data, all it can output is just what it has seen before, that's not entirely true. It may not be able to become very creative ultimately, because it tries to answer a question, fine-tuned to the prompt that we have given it. So that prompt can take it in certain directions where there is no real relevant data on the internet based on which it has been trained. So it is a possibility that it can come up with something new, but the industry is divided on it, right? But my belief is it can definitely come up with something new, but can it create videos which would be viral on their own without human in the loop? Unlikely. It would be the creativity of the human being, but it's just that the outcomes come faster with all these tools, and that is what will I feel that is how it will be. So I don't want to believe that it can only output what it has seen. That can't be true. So I would say it's a mix.
So we've been talking about how AI is, of course, coming into our lives, and we need to adapt to it. So how would it be for the engineers today? Like, we do say that they need to adopt and adapt AI, but what would their mindset be? So how would you interpret?
So there are a lot of industry leaders who have called out that computer science degrees are going to be obsolete very soon and all that, and there are some very strong people in AI also calling out that that's not true, because AI can only be as creative as you prompt it, right? So tying to some of the earlier things that we spoke about, mechanical empathy is important. Knowing how this works, the environment it works, fine tuning it for that environment. That context is not really available to an AI right now, right? Things are changing rapidly with MCP and AI to AI bots and all that, but it's not very easy yet, right? If you look at the foundational knowledge, right, when I look at code which is generated by a good developer versus somebody who's just learning the ropes, even though both of them have access to AI, I can see a stark difference in the quality of output. So it definitely means that human in the loop is definitely doing some tricks there. And how do you really, so even though you have access to these tools, you can churn out code, you can churn out systems very quickly, being able to understand why are certain things done in a certain way, and is there having some sort of tribal knowledge on what are the other ways in which systems like this are being built, all that continues to be important. So I still feel that having a solid foundational knowledge is essential, right? And when you get into some really nuanced problem statements, you would be really surprised by the bad quality coming out of AI. But when you prompt, you get really, start getting a lot better. So so that's why I said, two people having access to the same AI, the outputs are not the same, which means it's a person, right? And as a person, how do you get better? You have to just keep reading, and you have to keep understanding the foundational aspects. You have to keep improving your knowledge. You have to look at how other systems are built, and you have to be more curious. So there is a role for the human beings too.
So how are we leveraging AI at Tarento? That would be an interesting question.
So I hope all of you have heard about the iVolve integration framework that we have, right? We have been able to, get into a lot of projects just because we have an accelerator like iVolve. Okay, and iVolve, for those who don't know, is an accelerator which actually allows enterprise customers to rapidly go from one integration framework to another. Right now, integration framework is how you connect different systems, right? And there are a lot of business reasons why enterprises want to move from framework A to framework B, and that is a very tedious process, because if it is done by human beings, entirely by human beings, it is error prone, and sometimes it is repetitive as well, because a lot of these integration frameworks, it's not like you write code. There's a lot of configuration, there's a lot of auto mapping and all that of data fields from the source to the target, all of that, right? So if you just purely look at it from a human-centric way, it's not very exciting, work, and it's error prone when humans do it. So that's how we came up with iVolve, where we are able to say that you just say what is your source platform, and import some of this configuration and the code, and this will generate about 70 to 80%, and depending on the type of integration platform, in some cases it is 70 to 80, in some cases it may be 50 to 60. So this is one initiative that we have been running for the last 2 years, and like I said, we have won a lot of deals because of this, right? So we are yielding results. So we are already swimming in those waters. Now, when it comes to development, right? How do we use Gen AI for development? I'm sure a significant part of our dev workforce is actually leveraging a lot of these tools. Okay. Recent things that if we were to talk about, Figma, which is the design tool that most of us use on projects, they have created a MCP server. So I just want to talk about a minute about MCP as well. So if you look at an LLM, a lot of people, significant part, population using AI still goes into a portal or uses a mobile app to interact with AI. So you either go to a ChatGPT or a Claude AI portal, or use those apps, you put your problem statement and you get responses out, right? And sharing context, it's very limited context you can share, right? Because it's as good as how you can articulate your prompt to the LLM, right? And that's where these protocols, MCP and AI protocols are coming in, where what they're trying to solve is, how do you have these tools being able to talk to their surrounding systems, right? So what MCP server for Figma does is, it allows you to talk to your design, right? Like, as human beings, we see the design, we are seeing tags, we are seeing colors, we are seeing some text put by the designers, we are seeing maybe how the screen is designed, what are the components, what's the header, footer, all of that. We're seeing all that. But when you use an MCP server, the LLMs can see that without we being in the loop. So it's like a way for an LLM to now start talking to a design, right, without a human in the loop, right? So we have started leveraging MCP for a lot of our projects. So MCP server for Figma for a lot of our projects, and we are seeing wonderful results. We are seeing that 70 to 80% of UI code and is being auto-generated by some of these tools, right? So that's a great place to be in. Now, this I spoke about MCP, which is pretty front end centric. On the back end, we are using Cloud Code. We are using, I'm sure a lot of people are using Windsurf and Cursor and a lot of these tools. And what we are also realizing is there is no one right tool. Maybe there is one right tool for a team depending on their context, because we've seen that certain tools work well when you're starting something greenfield, when you're starting from scratch. Certain tools work better when you have an existing code base and you have to start making changes there. So it's a mixed bag, right? And what we are trying to do at Tarento is we are trying to see what tools work best in each of these scenarios, and you will see a lot of training sessions in the next few months around how have certain things been cracked leveraging AI, right? So one, we are building things on AI. Second, what is relevant to the larger workforce is how do we leverage AI in our day-to-day. Now, I spoke about use cases for developers, but whether it's a QA team, whether it's a product team, everybody needs to start leveraging these tools. And I feel it is already happening, but I also feel that a portion of developers are still stuck in that mode which I spoke about earlier, where you go into a platform and you're supplying context and getting some output, and then you take it back into your editors and all of that. So that shift needs to happen as well. So we are going to tackle that to a bunch of trainings, and you will hear more on that.
So talking about all these tools, we have these open source tools which most of us refer to or taken for our work. So why do you think that developers as such, why are they giving us all these open source tools for use?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. So what is the benefit of open source, if I were to rephrase, right? And quite a bit of time we think that it is developers giving us these tools, but it's actually not developers. Those developers are parts of communities which are well funded by corporates. Okay, let me take you through the history of Unix. Okay, Unix is an operating system most of us would have heard, right? If you go back 25 years, pretty much every big company was trying to create their own Unix flavor. Okay, so IBM had something called AIX, Sun had something called Solaris, HP had something called HPUX, and there are so many Unix flavors out there. Everybody was trying to build the same thing, right? And all of them were spending money, but because they were built as a proprietary, with a proprietary mindset, what that meant is AIX could run on only certain types of servers, certain type of hardware, and because two reasons. One, they wanted a monopoly. They wanted anybody buying their servers to also get an operating system. Second thing was they just didn't have time, and budget to just test it out on all other hardware and try to be everywhere. Now that changed with Linux, right? When Linux came about, because it was started open source, the benefit it got was the industry came, and open source means you can make changes and you can fine tune it for your use cases. So the best way to visualize is all these individual Unix tracks. They were spending a lot of money, but they were making the same kind of steps. There's no incremental innovation or societal innovation where it all adds up. They were all in pockets. They were all innovating in the same style. But with Linux, a lot of these developers came together, and they could ensure that Linux can run on pretty much any machine. If you look at any machine that we use, right, your phones, barring iPhones, all of them run Linux or some version of Linux. So the relevance of open source is, there are different reasons why people or companies open source products. Sometimes it is to get that incremental innovation. If you have different sets of people trying to solve the same problem versus if it's all collaborative, you get a lot more innovation, right? Sometimes open source is also for soft power, okay? And all the AI open sourcing that is happening, it is for a lot of soft power. Sometimes it is to kill competition, okay? When Meta launches a new version of Llama, they also would have a view that because a lot of people now think that Llama is a very good LLM that you can run in your servers, we will not really do any R&D, we'll just use Llama, right? And so there's a lot of reasons why people open source stuff, right? Sometimes it is to standardize, right? Like some of these specifications that we use, right? If people didn't open source them, then they would be not so common and they'll be used in some industries, not very widely accepted and all that. So sometimes standardization. So there's no one reason why developers or companies open source. There's like multitudes of reasons. And specifically for open source AI models, there we have to wear a slightly different lens, because unlike open source software where the code is available and you're free to make changes, open source AI models do not give you their training mechanisms, their training tech and all that. They only allow you to use those weights, which means you can use them as decision or maybe generators, and you can fine tune them. But you can't really, you would never get a view on, how is the parent company releasing this model? How are they actually able to train it? All that is all still, they're still within those organizations, right? So there's a stark contrast between how open source was working earlier and all these new age open source, specifically the LLM tracks, right? There are a lot of other AI projects in open source like NA10 where the source code is also open, but AI model specifically, it's not that the source code is open, it's only the weights. So you can just use that as an LLM, but you would have no clue on how it was trained, how it was set up and how is it working. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would connect with my next question on how these big companies view the open source AI versus the closed AI.
Yeah.
So what is the trend?
Yeah. So if you see, OpenAI, although they are very open in the naming, right? They were always pioneers of closed models. I mean, because they thought that that's the best way to monetize those models. But with the recent trend where big companies are open sourcing their models, when I say open sourcing their models, it's not the code again, it's the weights. So you can use the model, but you will not be able to generate something like that of your own, right? So if you look at all these companies, they've been doing it. What they don't clearly call out is, are they using the exact models or are they actually applying layers of innovation on top of them for their use cases? So I feel like some of it is to kill competition so that you kind of discourage others from spending a lot of money on it. Of course, there is also goodwill because they're pumping in millions to build some of these things, right? So they are generous enough to kind of let others use it. That's obviously there. That goes without saying. But killing competition, ensuring that people, you kind of build an ecosystem around your offering, right? If you look at Facebook, now people use Facebook, but you would never really interact directly with their AI, right? I mean, it gets embedded in various functions on Meta, right? But I think they are trying to take it the Linux way, where you have these big companies which are doing a lot of research. They have pretty much crunched all the information on the internet to build to take the models to where they are. I also read that they are running out of training data now, right? So I think they're looking for that Linux moment where so what was happening now is like the Unix moment. Every company within their organizations, they were doing a lot of research. They were trying to make it better, but now they're putting forward these tools on the open. You get a lot of developer feedback. Like the day DeepSeek R1 was launched, was made public, a lot of companies in India have hosted it for customers in India, right? So you get feedback, you have feedback loops, the community start building around them, right? So I also feel that apart from all those economic interests, like how to tackle competition, soft power and all of that, there's also a genuine need to get this feedback in, so that it can now incrementally improve rather than or exponentially improve, I should say, than just like what these companies can do on their own. So it's a mixed bag, and only future will say like what was the true intent of this. Like if you go back to why did Microsoft acquire GitHub for $8 billion 7-8 years ago, right? we were truly surprised because Microsoft is known for building proprietary solutions, right? We were truly surprised. Why are they kind of acquiring GitHub? But now when they launch Copilot, you now know what was their thought process, right? So, there's no set path. It's a community which will take it places.
Yes, so we've heard a lot on AI, the buzz, and a little bit on privacy, probably, or data privacy, because now we're saying that everything's there. You can do anything you want with AI. So we're just saying when people are uploading, say, photos to AI apps, so where does this really go and store? Where does this data?
It sits on, if you're using an app to kind of upload pictures, it just goes and sits on their servers, right? They're spending money to store your images, so you should know that. And if you're using the service free, you should know that they will derive some value for themselves, and of course you will also get benefited in the process. So it is very clear that if you're using a product free and you're uploading your data, it is going to get used in some shape and form, right? There are companies like Apple, right? Google also to a certain extent. They do focus on a lot of privacy aspects. Like I'll give you an example. If you look at Apple, one of the reasons that Apple is struggling with AI is because they have this internal view that privacy is important. Our users' privacy is important for us. They have that organizational view. And if privacy is important, then privacy and AI actually are pretty difficult cousins to deal with, right? And that's one of the reasons why the industry says that Apple and AI are not going so well. Okay. Now Apple applies a concept called differential privacy. What is differential privacy? Let's say that you actually want to. We all use emojis, right? We all use emojis while communicating, right? Now, let's say that the creators of these emojis really want to know what's more popular, in what context they are used, right? What is not important is who's using them, right? So there is a way in which, so this data, when we use emojis in applications, there's a way to, either you can say that Matthew uses this emoji 3/4 of the time versus this emoji which is 1/4 of the time, or there is a way to kind of anonymize this data and say that some user in this sort of demographic pattern is using this. So that's differential privacy, right? Differential privacy implies that you don't really collect PII to be able to go back to that person and say, why did you do this? Or like to know that, to correlate this usage pattern to an individual. You don't store it that way. You kind of put in some noise in the data you're collecting so that you can't really trace back to who you collected it from, right? But it is genuine data, right? Even when we were building Diksha, Sunbird, which is one of our large programs, we ensured, and we were expecting a lot of students to come onto the platform, and we didn't want PII data of students. So what we did is, when a user comes in, we don't ask them to log in. You can access all the content on Diksha without logging in. So, but we still want data saying, what are the courses that more people are interested in. So what we did is, every time you come in, we generate a UUID, and that becomes that user's identifier. So we don't know your name, we don't know your age group, we don't know anything about you. We know where you are in, where you're coming from, we know which district, which city, but we don't know anything else about the user, right? But we get valuable insights into what are the most popular courses, what are, how much time are people spending on courses, all of that, which is essential. So there are companies focusing on that, but not every company is obviously looking at that. So this is one aspect, right? So you have to be very cautious on where you're uploading. Don't just upload because your friends are also doing it. You have to really, if you are very concerned about privacy, and the reason I make that statement is, we are in a country where people wouldn't think twice to share OTPs with others, right? We are in a country where we wouldn't care if some random person asks us for a copy of our Aadhaar, we will give it, right? So and that's why I'm making that statement, that if you are deeply concerned about privacy, there are ways in which you can kind of ensure that you're protected. Like there are some browsers which ensure that more than a certain degree of information doesn't go out onto the internet about you, and you obviously have to read the privacy agreement, right? Which is something which we usually just scroll and just say accept, right, in a hurry. But there's a lot of information out there which, I mean, if you are so inclined about privacy. Now there will be a time period where privacy will become like a state subject, right? The DPDP Act and all that, when it starts getting enforced, the government will take care of our privacy, hopefully. But until then, you have to ensure that you are putting your data in systems that are trustable widely, and that's important.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for that, Matthew. I think that was useful for a lot of people who would have doubts on whether to upload or not. So, the question.
When in doubt, don't.
Don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing in line with that, which is so I am typing something into the chatbot. I'm asking things. So how do the AI companies see this? I mean, do they really see what I'm typing or what I'm asking?
Yeah,
how does that?
That's a good question. What worries me is you're thinking about the AI companies getting this data. What we most of the time don't or we overlook is the keypad is not from that company, right? So when you type something on an Android phone, the keypad is not from Claude or OpenAI. The keypad is from Google. They see the data first, okay? So that's
yeah, Google is following.
Yeah. So no, but they are professional. They make it clear how they use the data as well. So when you're typing in something, it's your keypad which actually knows you the most, and then the company. Okay. So at least what Google says is that, and they obviously need a lot of information. Like if there are 100,000 people typing a word, and because of the way the mobile keypads are designed, if they say that everybody typing, let's say some word like nothing is missing I, then they also have, I mean, you see autofill and all that, right? All that is possible because they know that people make these mistakes and this is probably what you mean. So for that kind of model evolution, they actually need to capture what are you typing and what did you actually mean, right? So they really have to capture that data. What Google does is they say that data is remaining on your device, and only so the differential privacy aspect that I spoke about, they say that only some part of that information which is really useful to improve the model gets shipped from your device. So as long as it is in your device, you are safe. Now going back to the bigger question, of course you typed in, there's some keyboard analytics getting generated. The keyboard company, the keypad company knows much more about you. Now, what happens to your data once you put it on AI? So if you see, recently Claude, which is very popular, I'm sure a lot of us use Claude, they changed their privacy terms to say, by default, the data that you put in will be used to train our models. Up until a month ago, the default privacy setting was, we will not use your data to train our models. So you see the shift, right? And now tie that to the statement I made earlier. There are experts saying that the amount of valuable data, text data that is available on the internet has already been exhausted in training. So now they need more data to make the models better. So you will start seeing a lot of these tweaks coming in, right? Of course, Claude also allows you to go and say, don't use my data, but you can always assume that if you have to go into a setting page and change it, only people who are so concerned about privacy and people who have the patience and time to really read those long emails would go and do it, right? So it will be a fraction of people who kind of do that. So there's already shifts in with respect to privacy, right? There's also another thing that now there are a lot of lawsuits against these AI companies because when you let's say take a Medium subscription, right? Some of us will be reading Medium articles, right? When you take a Medium subscription, I'm pretty sure that their terms of agreement earlier would not have said that you should not use this data for any training because there's no such thing at that time, right? But now I'm sure they would have covered it in their terms of agreement that you should only use it for human consumption, you can't share it with others, and or use it for training models and all that. They would have put those rules. So it is an evolution journey. The best bet is that some strong rules come in, and there is some regulation, so that bulk of the population which is not aware of all this, they don't fall into all these traps. But when I'm speaking at Tarento, I expect that because we are in the space of building secure systems for our customers, we should know some of these things, and we should kind of ensure that some of these things are taken care in systems we build. Right? That's how I would put it.
So yeah, that will come to my last question on how is building these powerful AI systems help? When building them, how do you keep the data safe? How do you keep the user data safe? So
yeah. So if you look at a simple web application, right? When we access a web application from Tarento, from our internet gateway, right? The server which is receiving our request can see that this request is from Tarento, right? From the IP address, they can also, even if they are not able to figure out that it is from Tarento, they can figure out that it is coming from some place in Bangalore. There are geo-IP databases where and it's baked into the protocol. It was done with good intent, right? Now, when we are building systems, what we have to ensure is that we only collect data that we absolutely need, and we abide by the law of the land. If you're building a system so we, at TVS, we are building a system which is going to be deployed in Europe. Okay, if you're building a system for Europe, because Europe is very, very clear. I mean, they had GDPR like ages ago, right? So they're very clear on the privacy concerns of their citizens. So there are set rules. So we have to ensure that before we store the data of a customer in Europe in our servers, we have to actually get a consent from them. I mean, storing is still okay if they're doing a transaction with you, but if you have to send out a marketing mailer to them, you have to get a consent that they're okay to receive that, right? So they are already at that level. So we have to really know regulations, and also, where possible, anonymize the data, because when you're collecting data for an enterprise, what is important is that maybe your intent is good now, but you wouldn't be manning or running those systems maybe 5 years down the line. This data could be used or misused by somebody else after you. So that's where I would generally say that collect only minimal data and anonymize where possible. And important data, the government already mandates that, like if you collect Aadhaar number, unless you're a bank or something, you can only store a masked Aadhaar number in your systems, right? So I think it's a mix of these things. When you build big systems of impact, taking care of all these aspects is very, very key.
Thank you, Matthew. So I think that was a sneak peek into everything, bit of what AI does, how to keep our systems safe, right, and what is the open source culture. Let's wait for a few questions from the audience.
What would you suggest for those who want to contribute in open source projects, and how it will be useful for our field?
Right. So I would say, before you think of contributing to open source projects, that's like the ultimate step, right? Like if you pick up 10,000 developers, maybe there are 5 who are contributing to open source projects. But I would say that some of these projects, the source code you find in open source projects, they've gone through so many rounds of reviews, and because the amount of effort that goes into ensuring that this is the best way to implement this capability, right? So I would first urge developers to start being readers of open source code, because you will see the right ways of doing things. I mean, if you look at code that is built in an enterprise, you will see that it is built with the intent of solving a business problem. It is not built with the intent of being reusable by somebody or built by many people in the world, right? So it is solving a point problem statement. But if you're building something open source, it means that your intent is that somebody else should use it. So you would have some aspects of generalization, a lot of best practices, really clean code, right? So you will have a lot of these attributes out there. So my first view would be, start reading source code. I I mean, that's a great habit to have, especially if you're a young engineer coming into the industry. Reading source code, from open source projects gives you a big leap, right? The second step is, I would say, you are using a library. It doesn't do exactly what you want, right? You kind of, at that point, you have two options, right? The easier option is you take a copy of that code, make the change, and you use it for yourself. Nobody else in the world knows you have a copy, and you are using it. You have made this change to use it. The better way to do it is, when you have that need, you can create a fork of that repo, make that change, and try sending a pull request to the parent repo. It may never get accepted, but these are baby steps to start getting involved in the open source world, right? The other thing is, if you are using a library and you hit upon a bug, most of us just maybe start using a different library, but we don't go into that open source forum and raise a question. So in open source world, it is not just that contributors, the definition of contributors to open source is not just people who are writing code and sending tons and tons of code to them. Everybody who's tested it, everybody who's given feedback, everybody who's helped another person solve the same problem that we faced and solved, they are all considered contributors, right? So that is a very broad question. How do I so start with reading source code, right, that others have written. You get better over time, right? You might think that with AI I'm already getting the best. No, you would be wrong. Like, I remember the example I said, that two developers who have access to the same AI tools, the output is different because there's something in that developer, right? So that applies. So read a lot of source code, start giving feedback, right? And then start sending pull requests. That's how you look at it. Right? And open source communities, they are not very easy to get into as well, right? I mean, because there's a lot of due diligence. So when you start trying to send some code to them, that's when you'll realize that the 4 lines you wrote could have been imagined in a very different way. You get that kind of feedback. So there's a lot of eye-opening that will happen when you go in through that journey. And I'd encourage everybody to at least do one of these things. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions from people online? Anybody would like to ask any questions?
Matthew Basha here.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Actually, maybe it's connected to the topic. It's about the AI. Recently, there are different trends were going. Okay, if you see, sometimes it was like ChatGPT, then it has been Ghibli, then it's been something else with now Nano Banana, and don't know what else for future. So people really are sharing and uploading their photos and videos to see it in a different form. As you said already, it might be useful for the AI companies in some format of some of the things. Would you emphasize to stop following the trend like this? How do you keep our self-privacy?
So there is a privacy meter for everybody, right? Where I feel secure may be different from where the person sitting next to me might feel secure, right? So to each his own, basically. Be aware that if it's a free platform and you're actually uploading a lot of data, it will get used to either make a system better, or it can even get used to target something against you. Target as in not a missile or something, but ads or something like that, right? So these trends have been there well before this AI wave as well, right? I mean, if you see, I think 10 years ago there was a trend where, I think it was on Facebook. I mean, I am not on Facebook, so you can understand my privacy meter is a bit low. There was a trend where people were asked to upload pictures of you now and you 10 years ago, and everybody was happily doing it. And now we know why it is relevant, right? It was used to train a lot of image recognition algorithms. So now it's not harmful thinking. The intent is not harmful, but you are actually powering some algorithms to make better decisions. So you can either think that I want to be that social soldier and contribute to that, and you can be choosy with what you upload, right? All your data cannot be uploaded, obviously, right? So I would say that these trends will happen. Now, if you see the Google Nano Banana trends and the Ghibli trends and all, now I don't think anybody goes for the Ghibli trends, right? So these waves will keep coming, right? And we are just helping them train systems. Now, is that required? That is absolutely required, because without data, these systems cannot get better. But what data do you give to it is important, and they are also trying their best to put in the guardrails. Like for example, recently somebody was telling me that they were trying in Nano Banana, they were trying to upload somebody's picture and say, convert this person to Lord Mahabali. Okay, and that was declined, it seems. So that's a good trend, which means that you can't do nonsense on these platforms, but they will start using your data and they'll start putting guardrails so that your data is used in the right shape and form. So they are doing their bit, but obviously there is a small section of people, or there's always those negative elements, right, which will always be running faster than the rest of the innovation. So we can't block it. So I would say just be cautious and use your privacy meter to figure out like what you want uploaded and what you don't.
Yes, I can see many hands have raised. Who would like to go first? Manju.
Yeah. So thank you, Matthew. I think you explained everything well. I have one question, like if you see that like different organizations, most probably they have some licensing of the AI, and for the purpose of like when something you upload, search, or your pattern or your org data should not leave your boundary, because then it is more. So inside the Tarento, do we have anything such?
Yeah. We are
because if everything is open source, obviously people will use different open source platform.
Yeah.
Sometimes they will upload some data and might by mistake some secure data also can go to that, and it can have some serious concern. So how we are mitigating that part?
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic. I spoke about how Microsoft acquired GitHub. They have access to all that source code. They're able to train models, and it helps us now. Right? Now, Copilot is free for everybody. We have to start thinking, why is it free for everybody? Right? With GitHub, there are clear agreements that Microsoft can only just use open source code for all their training. There are a lot of enterprises on GitHub. Okay? A lot of enterprise code is on GitHub. They cannot use that for training, because there are licenses that it's your code, it's just posted here. We just allow you to access it and nobody else. We will not read that data. There will be clauses like that. So why have they given Copilot free now? Right? That question needs a lot of deeper thought. If you use a free Copilot on an enterprise code base, and if you read the Copilot fine print, they say that we are capturing the context in our servers. What's the context? Part of the source code. Right? So which means enterprise code that they did not have access to directly. Right? Not everything was on GitHub, obviously, or with Microsoft, but it's within enterprises as well. By virtue of developers just using these free plugins, they're actually getting to learn. Okay. Now, is that good? That's not good. It's almost like saying that we wouldn't put enterprise code up on the internet in an open source repo, right? Because that is a customer specific code, right? It's they have paid to get it and they own it, right? It's their IP. So if we use free tools in enterprise code bases, there's a lot of enterprise data that gets shipped to that enterprise. We realize that at Tarento. So we are now taking steps to see how can we get into that licensed ecosystem, where in the licensed ecosystems it's very clear that they don't use this for training their models. They may be picking this data which will lie somewhere, but they will not be using it for training their models. So we are actually making those steps. That's a very important question, Manzarul, and we are taking steps in that direction.
I hope your question is answered. I see. Is it Devendra who would like to ask?
Matthew, I have two questions. I just wanted to know practicality and actual value out of these AI hype. So, first question is, are LLMs providing meaningful ROI in enterprise and society, or are they adopted mostly for hype and speculation? So just I would like to hear from you. How do you see this?
Yeah. So my view is it's both, right? You need to create some hype if you want users, right? If Google launches Nano Banana and if they don't themselves set some trends like some trending images and all that, people will not flock to their platforms to get it, right? So there is an element of hype for sure, but let's just look at how it is helping us build systems faster. Now I'll take a very practical example. If we were, writing some code, let's say 3 years ago, we wouldn't write automated unit tests because writing automated unit tests for code would mean additional budgets, right? Developer had to spend more time. So now with these tools, it's become easier to even get that done in the same kind of time frame. So it is definitely helping. Now there is obviously a hype cycle with anything new that comes in, because there's a lot of economics behind it as well. I'm not getting into those aspects. I'm neither an expert in that, but it is very, very clear that clients are expecting more value in the same time frame and budget, and that is only possible by leveraging these tools, right? So there is a hype, and everything that we have come across, every big innovation has always had some hype associated with it. In AI, I think the balance is a bit tilted in more hype versus thing, but definitely there are benefits. I give you some examples. Like I use Claude Code to resolve review comments that I have on somebody else's code. Earlier I had to speak to a developer, and maybe there is some sort of transmission loss that happens. I say something, somebody interprets differently, all that. But now I'm able to do that with Claude Code. So I would say that the benefits are tangible, they're real, and we should just play into the hype as well. It's not just about work, right? There's some other aspects as well, right? So there will be some hype, and we have to just learn to live with it.
Yes, thanks. The second question which I have is, what real scalable business model exists for LLM-driven companies, and is the sector sustainable long term?
Good question. I only read articles about this. The amount of power they need to kind of power some of our simple queries is much higher than what we imagine. Okay, but there is also an industry metrics that says that it is, compared to the time when we started seeing ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT was, I think, GPT-3. There were GPT models before that as well, which were not so popular. So compared to the cost of compute for processing a certain amount of tokens, then versus now is order of magnitudes cheaper. So they are getting better, but I still read that it's a heavy investment mode. Sam Altman himself has said that if every user becomes a Prime Plus user or so, even then they will just break even. That's $200 a month by every user, right? So right now all these companies are in investment mode, but you're right on the sustainability part, and specifically around the power usage and all that. I think they are getting better, but it's still pretty costly. We can do our part by not going to an LLM for the simplest of things. It's easier said, right? I am so used to seeing in Teams meeting that developers go to some of these tools to get basic commands. You got the command once, you still go to the tool to get the command again. It's not a search engine. It's recomputing all that for you, right? So you can be responsible users. You can help play your role, towards a sustainable future. But having said that, that's going to be just like trivial. All of us doing that will not really solve the power needs of AI. So, but if you go by the trend, like how they have made that the same queries are now order of magnitude times cheaper, if that trend continues, then we would have sustainable AI over time, right? And now that it is open source, right? There will be a lot of innovation. Like DeepSeek claims that they are able to train similar models on much lower hardware. It's only a claim, but but there are people trying to do that. So it's a journey, Devendra. That's how I would put it.
Thank
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Devendra. Any more questions? All right then. Thank you so much, Matthew. It was really great having this interactive session with you. And I think it's now kindling our curiosity to read more AI, learn more AI, use it the right way. So thank you so much for your time.
It's clear if you don't embrace AI, you're going to fall out in the long run. So embrace it and leverage it in the right way.
And thank you everyone else for joining us in this session. I hope you have gotten some great insights on how AI impacts our lives as well. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.